Why do God's chosen people often face financial struggles before they experience success? Is it a test, a lesson, or perhaps something even deeper? Today, we're uncovering the hidden truth behind why those called by God often suffer financially first, and how these struggles set the stage for their breakthrough. This isn't what most people expect, but it's the key to understanding God's plan for His chosen. Stick with me to discover the real reason behind the hardship and how it ultimately leads to a greater purpose. When we think of God's chosen ones, we often imagine people who are blessed with abundance, prosperity, and smooth paths. After all, if someone is truly chosen by God, surely they should have everything they need without struggle, right? However, the reality is that many of those whom God calls to fulfill a higher purpose often go through some of the toughest financial hardships before they see any breakthrough. This idea doesn't fit neatly into the picture that many of us have of what it means to be blessed by God. In fact, the Bible shows us countless examples of God's chosen people enduring financial hardship and suffering before experiencing their promised blessings. Take Abraham, for example. God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars, but before that promise came to pass, he faced famine, exile, and many years of waiting. Joseph too was chosen by God, but before he rose to power in Egypt, he was sold into slavery, imprisoned, and abandoned. These stories highlight a deeper truth. Being chosen by God doesn't automatically mean an easy life, especially when it comes to finances. So, why does this happen? Why do God's chosen often suffer financially before they experience prosperity? What's the purpose behind these struggles? The answer might not be obvious, but the key lies in understanding the lessons and spiritual growth that come with hardship. For those who are truly chosen, financial struggles are not just challenges. They are opportunities. They are the means by which God prepares His people for the greater calling ahead. Financial hardship is a refining process, one that builds resilience, trust, and dependence on God's provision. To understand why God's chosen often face financial struggles, we first need to grasp who these chosen individuals really are. In the Bible, being chosen by God isn't about being selected for a life of comfort or ease. It's about being called to fulfill a purpose greater than ourselves, often one that requires immense faith, sacrifice, and endurance. God's chosen ones are those who have been set apart for His glory, to carry out a mission that often challenges the status quo and demands everything they have. Consider the stories of figures like Moses, David, and Esther. These individuals weren't chosen to live a life free of pain or difficulty. In fact, their journeys were marked by trials that tested their character, faith, and trust in God. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, but before he could experience the freedom of his people, he endured rejection, doubt, and wilderness. David was anointed as king, yet before he could claim the throne, he lived years on the run, hunted by King Saul, facing financial strain and personal loss. Even Esther, who became queen, faced perilous circumstances where her courage and faith were tested in a way that no one would have expected from someone living in luxury. The common thread in these stories is that being chosen by God often means walking a difficult path, one filled with challenges that go beyond what the world would consider blessings. It's easy to believe that those chosen by God are simply given everything they need. But in reality, God's chosen often face significant financial struggles and personal hardships as part of their preparation. This is because God's purpose for them requires character, strength, and trust, qualities that are built through overcoming adversity. In the midst of financial struggle, God is refining his people, teaching them to rely on him fully, not just for material needs, but for spiritual growth and trust in his provision. The trials and hardships that God's chosen ones face, especially in terms of financial struggles, are not random or without purpose. In fact, these challenges serve a greater spiritual purpose. They are opportunities for growth and deepening faith. God allows these financial hardships as a way to build spiritual resilience, shaping his chosen individuals into people who fully trust in his provision and power. These struggles aren't signs of God's abandonment, but rather his way of refining his people for the work he has planned for them. Think about how gold is refined. Gold, when first mined, is impure and filled with imperfections. It must be placed in fire, where the heat burns away the impurities, leaving behind pure gold. Similarly, God allows his chosen to go through the fire of financial struggles because it purges them of self-reliance and pride, revealing a more authentic, trusting faith. As much as we may want to avoid suffering, it's through the trials that our faith is tested and strengthened. When everything around us feels uncertain, when the bills pile up and it seems like nothing is going right, those are the moments when we have the opportunity to trust God in ways that we couldn't when everything was easy. The Bible speaks about this process in several places. James chapter 1, 2-4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This passage highlights how trials, including financial ones, produce perseverance, an essential quality for anyone chosen by God. Perseverance isn't just about enduring. It's about learning to lean on God, recognizing that he is our true source of provision and strength. Through financial hardship, we learn to let go of our own efforts to control everything, and instead place our trust in God's timing and care. This process of spiritual growth through hardship is a theme throughout the Bible. When God's chosen face financial struggles, they are being prepared for something greater. They are learning to rely not on their own resources, but on God's ability to provide. Just like Abraham's journey of faith, which included times of famine, God used those difficult moments to deepen Abraham's trust in him. In the same way, financial hardships are used by God to stretch and strengthen his chosen, making them more capable of handling the blessings he has planned for them in the future. Through these struggles, they are being equipped to carry out the mission God has called them to. And that mission will ultimately require both spiritual strength and the wisdom to handle material wealth with humility and grace. When we look at the lives of biblical figures, we can see that financial struggles often marked the beginning of their journey before they were able to experience the fullness of God's promises. These stories aren't just for the people in the Bible. They hold valuable lessons for anyone walking a path that feels filled with challenges, especially financial ones. Consider Joseph, whose life exemplifies the pattern of suffering before blessing. Joseph was chosen by God, given dreams of greatness, but before he could see those dreams fulfilled, he was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. The financial hardships he faced were severe. He had nothing, not even the freedom to change his circumstances. Yet these trials were the very things that prepared him for the position of power and influence he would later hold in Egypt, where he would be able to save countless lives, including those of his own family. What we often miss in these stories is that the hardships Joseph faced weren't just about his personal growth. They were about God's plan for others too. Joseph's financial struggle, his time in the pit and in prison, was part of the larger story of redemption that God was orchestrating for an entire nation. God's chosen ones are often placed in situations of hardship not only to refine their character, but also to prepare them for greater purposes. ones that affect not only their own lives, but the lives of many others. Joseph's financial difficulties were a stepping stone to his future success, where he would be in a position to provide for his people during a time of famine. What seemed like a setback was actually part of God's grand plan. Similarly, we see in the lives of figures like David, who was anointed as king but had to endure years of living as a fugitive, facing constant financial strain and the threat of death before he was able to claim the throne. David didn't start his journey in royalty. He faced hardship, uncertainty, and fear. Yet those struggles shaped his leadership qualities, taught him how to rely on God, and prepared him for the responsibility of ruling a nation. The financial struggles of God's chosen are not signs of failure, but of preparation. They are the proving grounds where faith is tested, and reliance on God becomes the foundation of all future success. The lives of these biblical figures show us that financial hardship, though difficult and painful, can be a tool in God's hands to refine and prepare His chosen. Through financial struggles, we are taught humility, patience, and the importance of trusting in God's timing. These trials prepare us for the blessings God wants to give us, but more importantly, they prepare us for the responsibility that comes with those blessings. Without enduring hardship, we would not be able to carry the weight of the great things God has in store for us. Financial struggles, then, are not a sign of God's displeasure, but a necessary part of the process that leads to the fulfillment of His promises. The paradox of suffering before blessing is something that can be difficult to grasp. We often expect that when we are chosen by God, we should be granted success, comfort, and financial prosperity right away. However, as we see throughout Scripture, the reality is quite different. God's chosen people often experience some of the deepest struggles before they see any kind of prosperity or breakthrough. This is especially true when it comes to financial hardship. Take a moment to think about the story of Abraham. When God called him to leave his homeland and journey to an unknown land, Abraham didn't walk into a life of instant wealth or ease. In fact, he faced famine, separation from family, and moments of doubt. Yet, it was through these very challenges that God began to shape Abraham's character, teaching him to trust in God's promises even when the situation seemed bleak. God had promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, but Abraham had to wait many years and endure many hardships before he saw the fulfillment of that promise. It wasn't until after Abraham's faith had been tested, refined, and proven that he began to experience the blessings that were promised to him. Similarly, consider the Apostle Paul. Paul was chosen by God for an incredible purpose, to spread the gospel and build the early church. However, his journey was marked by incredible suffering, including financial struggles, imprisonment, shipwrecks, and beatings. Paul's financial hardships were not a result of disobedience, but were part of the process that God used to shape him for His purpose. The Apostle Paul didn't start out wealthy or with a position of comfort. He was tested in many ways, not only spiritually, but also financially. Yet it was through these trials that Paul's faith was strengthened, and his message became even more powerful. This paradox, struggling first before receiving blessings, is part of the pattern we see over and over in the lives of God's chosen. It's a reminder that God's way of working isn't always in the way we expect. We might think that financial struggles are a sign of failure, but often they are the first step in the journey toward God's bigger purpose for us. The suffering isn't the end of the story. It's the refining process that prepares us for the greatness that God has in store. Without the struggle, we wouldn't be ready for the blessing. The paradox of suffering before blessing teaches us to trust God, even when the road seems long and the struggle feels too much to bear. It's through this process that we develop the strength and character needed to steward the blessings God is preparing for us. The spiritual purpose behind financial hardship is a concept that is often misunderstood. Many people view financial struggles as punishment or a sign of divine displeasure. But in reality, these struggles can be a powerful tool in God's hands, shaping us in ways we may not fully understand in the moment. God uses hardship, including financial struggles, to refine our character, deepen our faith, and prepare us for the greater blessings He has in store. One of the most important spiritual lessons that comes through financial hardship is learning to rely on God fully. When we have everything we need, it's easy to feel self-sufficient and forget that our provision ultimately comes from God. Financial struggles, however, force us to face our dependence on Him. In times of lack, we are reminded that we cannot rely on our own strength or resources to get by. We are compelled to turn to God, trusting that He will provide for us, even when it seems impossible. This is not a lesson that is learned overnight. It takes time, and often it takes repeated cycles of difficulty to truly learn to trust God with our finances. In those moments when we don't know how the bills will be paid or where the next meal is coming from, it's easy to feel lost and overwhelmed. Yet, these are the very moments when God is teaching us to trust Him more deeply. As we seek Him for provision, we are learning to let go of the control we think we have, and to rest in the knowledge that God is our true provider. Another key spiritual lesson that comes through financial hardship is humility. Financial struggles can strip away our pride and force us to confront the reality of our human limitations. We may be used to providing for ourselves or being the ones who help others, but when we are the ones in need, it can be humbling. This humility is not a sign of weakness. Rather, it's a necessary part of the spiritual growth process. God is teaching us that true strength comes from relying on Him, not from our own abilities. Through financial hardship, we learn to be more compassionate and understanding toward others who are struggling, and we develop a deeper sense of gratitude for the blessings we do have. Finally, financial hardship serves as a refining fire. Just as gold is purified by fire, our faith is purified by trials. God allows these struggles to mold us into the people He has called us to be. We are tested and refined, our trust in God deepened, and our hearts prepared for the blessings that are to come. The process is not easy, but it is necessary. Without the hardships, we would not be ready to handle the great things God has in store for us. Through our struggles, we are being made more into the image of Christ, learning to walk in His footsteps of humility, dependence, and faith. Financial struggles can also be seen as a test of obedience. When God's chosen face hardship, especially financial, it is often an opportunity for them to demonstrate their trust and obedience to His will. In the face of financial difficulties, we are faced with a choice. Do we remain obedient to God's commands, even when it seems impossible? Or do we take matters into our own hands, trying to fix the situation ourselves without waiting for God's provision? This test of obedience is not limited to financial decisions alone, but affects every area of life. Do we obey God's instructions, even when they don't make sense in the context of our financial struggles? Do we continue to give, even when it feels like we have nothing left to give? Do we trust that God will provide for us when we put His kingdom first, even when the future looks uncertain? These are the questions that often arise during times of financial hardship. Consider the story of Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. In 1 Kings 17, during a time of severe famine, God sent Elijah to a widow who was preparing to make her last meal for herself and her son. Elijah asked her to give him water and bread, knowing that she had nothing left. Despite her own dire situation, the widow obeyed God's command through Elijah. In return, God provided for her and her son through the remainder of the famine. The key here is her obedience, even when it seemed illogical or impossible. She gave what little she had, trusting that God would provide for her needs, and in doing so, she witnessed God's miraculous provision. Similarly, in our financial struggles, God asks us to trust Him and obey His commands, even when it doesn't make sense to our natural minds. When we continue to give, serve, and follow God's guidance despite our lack, we demonstrate our trust that He will provide for us in ways we cannot see. Obedience in these moments is a powerful declaration of faith. It shows God that we are willing to prioritize His will over our own understanding of what we think we need or what seems logical. This obedience deepens our relationship with God, teaching us that His ways are higher than ours, and that His provision will always be enough. God doesn't promise that we won't face financial struggles, but He does promise to take care of us if we remain obedient. Matthew 6:33 reminds us, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." When we obey God, even in times of financial hardship, we are aligning ourselves with His plan for our lives. This obedience doesn't go unnoticed, and God promises to reward our faithfulness in His time, in ways that go beyond what we can imagine. The hidden blessings that come from financial struggles are often overlooked, because it's difficult to see the good in hardship while you're in the midst of it. But when we look closely, we can recognize that financial hardship often brings with it a number of blessings. Blessings that are spiritual, emotional, and even relational. While it may seem counterintuitive to say that hardship brings blessings, it's through struggle that we are shaped and prepared for what's to come. One of the first blessings that emerge from financial difficulty is a stronger sense of dependence on God. When everything is going smoothly, it's easy to forget where our true source of provision comes from. We become self-reliant, believing that our success is solely based on our efforts. However, when we face financial hardship, we are reminded of our limitations and our need for God. This dependence builds a deeper relationship with Him, as we learn to trust Him more fully and surrender our fears about the future. God often uses financial struggles to shift our focus back to Him, helping us realize that He is the one who sustains us. Another blessing that comes through financial difficulty is the growth of humility. Struggling financially forces us to confront our own pride, especially in a society that often equates financial success with worth or value. In times of hardship, we realize that our value doesn't come from what we own or how much money we have. Our true worth is in being children of God. Financial struggles allow us to experience a more authentic humility, where we learn to accept help from others and recognize the importance of community and support. It's in this place of vulnerability that we often grow in compassion for others who are facing similar struggles. Financial hardship also teaches us the blessing of contentment. When money is tight, we are forced to focus on what truly matters. The pursuit of material wealth often distracts us from the things that bring true joy, relationships, purpose, and spiritual growth. Struggling financially brings us face to face with the need to simplify our lives, focusing on what we truly need rather than what we think we want. This shift in perspective can lead to a deeper sense of contentment and gratitude for the things we have. Lastly, financial struggles often bring us closer to others. When we're struggling, it's easy to feel isolated and ashamed, but in truth, hardship can foster a deeper connection with people who have walked similar paths. As we experience the challenges of financial strain, we become more empathetic toward others who are also struggling. This empathy can lead to stronger relationships, as we learn to support each other in tangible ways, whether it's through prayer, encouragement, or even financial help. The connections we form in times of hardship often become some of the most meaningful and lasting relationships in our lives. So, while it's difficult to see in the midst of the struggle, financial hardship has the potential to bring numerous blessings that transform our lives. These blessings, dependence on God, humility, contentment, and stronger relationships, prepare us for the abundance and purpose God has for us in the future. What may seem like a setback is actually God's way of refining us, teaching us important lessons that will serve us well as we step into the prosperity He has in store. Faith is the cornerstone of overcoming financial struggles, especially for those who are chosen by God. While the world often looks to tangible solutions for financial problems, the believer's response is rooted in trust that God is ultimately in control of all things, including their financial situation. Faith in God during times of financial hardship is not just about believing that He will provide. It's about holding on to the certainty that His plan is unfolding in ways we may not understand in the moment, but is always for our good. When you're facing financial hardship, it's easy to feel like God has forgotten you or that you've been abandoned in your struggles. But true faith means trusting in God's goodness, even when circumstances seem bleak. Hebrews chapter 11:1 defines faith as the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Financial struggles often require this kind of faith, the faith to believe that, even though you can't see the solution, God is already working behind the scenes to provide for you. It's trusting that God will show up, even when it feels like there's no way out. The strength of faith is tested most in times of scarcity. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, when the bank account is full, the job is secure, and all your bills are paid. But what happens when things fall apart? That's when faith truly becomes vital. It's in those moments of financial difficulty that we have the opportunity to strengthen our relationship with God and deepen our trust in His provision. The Bible is full of examples of individuals who experienced financial hardship, but saw God's provision in ways they never imagined. For instance, when Elijah was sent to the widow in Zarephath, she had nothing left to feed him, yet she trusted God's word through Elijah and gave her last meal away. As a result, God miraculously provided for her and her son during a time of famine. 1 Kings 17:8-16. This story shows that faith, when exercised, allows God to work in powerful ways, even in the face of extreme lack. For the believer, financial struggles are not just obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to grow in faith. It's a chance to witness God's faithfulness in a way that we might miss when everything is going smoothly. When we choose to rely on God in times of financial difficulty, we are not only preparing for financial breakthrough, but also building the kind of faith that can handle the blessings He will eventually provide. It's easy to ask God for help when things are tough, but the real test is whether we continue to trust Him with everything, even when we don't yet see the answers. True faith means believing that God is sovereign over every area of our lives, including our finances. It's about trusting that He will provide exactly what we need, when we need it, even if it doesn't look the way we expect. As we hold on to that faith, we begin to see His provision in unexpected ways, through unexpected opportunities, through relationships, and through the peace that surpasses understanding. Faith in times of financial hardship is not just about receiving what we want. It's about trusting that God's plans are always better than our own, even when the road ahead seems uncertain. Holding on to hope during financial struggles can feel like an impossible task. When the bills pile up, when there seems to be no way forward, and when every effort to change your circumstances feels futile, hope can seem distant, even out of reach. But it's in these moments, when the weight of financial hardship feels unbearable, that the strength of our hope is truly tested. It's easy to be hopeful when things are going well. It's easy to trust in God when we can see the way forward. But what happens when everything seems uncertain and the future is clouded with doubt? This is where the real battle of hope happens. It's in the midst of struggle, when things seem bleak, that we must choose to hold on to hope, even when it feels like there is no reason to hope at all. Hope, in its truest form, is not just a wish or a fleeting emotion. It's a firm confidence in the goodness of God, even when our circumstances tell us otherwise. Romans 5:3-4 tells us that we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. When we face financial struggles, we are not just enduring for the sake of it. Every moment of hardship is shaping our character, refining us, and building the kind of hope that stands firm in the face of adversity. When we hold on to hope in the midst of financial difficulty, we are participating in God's redemptive plan for our lives. Financial struggles are not without purpose. They are a tool that God uses to shape us, to bring us closer to Him, and to teach us that our hope is not in our bank accounts, our jobs, or our possessions, but in His ability to provide for all our needs. In Matthew 6:25-26, Jesus reminds us that we should not worry about our material needs because God takes care of the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. If He cares for them, how much more will He care for us? Holding on to hope is trusting in this truth, that God sees our struggles, He understands our pain, and He promises to provide for us in His perfect timing. Hope is also an anchor for our hearts. It keeps us grounded when everything around us is shifting. It doesn't mean we ignore the reality of our financial struggles, but it means we choose to believe that there is more at play than what we can see. God is working behind the scenes, preparing us, teaching us, and leading us through the struggle to something greater. The hope we hold on to during these tough times doesn't promise an immediate fix or a quick resolution. Instead, it promises that God's plan for our lives is far greater than any temporary financial setback, and that His faithfulness will carry us through every challenge we face. Choosing to hope when everything else seems to be falling apart is one of the most powerful acts of faith we can make. It is a declaration that we believe in God's goodness and His provision, even when we can't see how things will work out. Hope is what allows us to keep going, even when the road ahead seems long and uncertain. It's what fuels perseverance and keeps us moving forward in trust. And as we continue to hold on to hope, we will begin to see that God's promises are true. He will never leave us nor forsake us, and His provision will always be enough. One of the biggest challenges many people face when going through financial hardship is the stigma that often comes with it. There's a social pressure that associates financial struggle with failure, weakness, or a lack of worth. In a world that constantly measures success by how much money you have, struggling financially can make you feel isolated, ashamed, or inadequate. For God's chosen, this stigma can add a layer of emotional and psychological burden to the already heavy weight of financial hardship. But the truth is, financial struggles are not a reflection of one's value or purpose in God's eyes. In fact, God often allows His chosen people to go through these difficulties for a deeper purpose, one that has nothing to do with shame or failure. Struggling financially does not mean you are less loved by God. nor does it mean you are any less worthy of His promises. It simply means you are in a season of preparation. The pressure to hide your financial difficulties, to pretend like everything is okay when it's not, can be overwhelming. But in reality, embracing the struggle and acknowledging it is part of breaking free from the stigma. We see this in the Bible with individuals like Job, who went through immense suffering and loss, including financial ruin. Job's story is not one of shame, it is one of resilience and faith. Even in his lowest moments, Job never lost his belief that God was still good, that God still had a plan for him, and that his value was not tied to his wealth or possessions. In the end, God restored Job's fortunes, but the story was never about his wealth. It was about his unwavering faith in God's goodness, even when his circumstances were at their worst. For those who are struggling financially, it's important to remember that the world's standards of success do not define your worth in God's eyes. The stigma that comes with financial hardship is a false narrative designed to make you feel less than. The truth is, God is using this season to build something stronger in you. He's shaping your character, building your trust in Him, and preparing you for something greater. The key to overcoming the stigma of financial struggle is shifting our perspective. Instead of viewing financial hardship as a sign of failure, we need to see it as an opportunity for growth, transformation, and deeper reliance on God. It's not about how much money you have, it's about how much faith you have. And faith, especially during difficult times, is what pleases God. When you're able to face financial struggles with your head held high, trusting that God is in control and that He's using this season for your good, you will not only break free from the stigma, but also walk into a place of spiritual strength and freedom. The ultimate purpose of financial testing is to prepare us for greater things that God has in store. Financial struggles are not meant to break us or leave us in a perpetual state of hardship. Rather, they serve as a refining process. Just as gold must go through the fire to be purified, we too must endure the fire of financial hardship to refine our faith, character, and dependence on God. Without this process, we would not be ready to handle the abundance and responsibility that come with the blessings God has promised. When we go through financial hardship, it teaches us to prioritize what truly matters. We learn to focus on our relationship with God, our loved ones, and our spiritual growth, rather than being distracted by material possessions or outward success. Through these trials, we gain wisdom and discernment, learning how to manage resources wisely and steward what God has given us. In the process, we develop a deeper understanding of what it means to live a life of integrity, trust, and humility. These lessons are not just for our own benefit. They prepare us to be a blessing to others, to share our resources generously, and to use our prosperity for God's kingdom. Financial testing also allows us to develop patience and perseverance. The waiting period can feel agonizing, but it is through waiting on God's provision that our faith is stretched. We learn to trust in God's timing, knowing that His plans are always better than our own. There are moments in the struggle when it seems like God is silent, but in reality, He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances that will ultimately lead to our breakthrough. This testing strengthens our resolve to stay faithful, even when the road is long and the answers aren't immediately apparent. Through financial struggle, God is also teaching us the importance of contentment. In a world that constantly encourages the pursuit of more, financial hardship forces us to learn how to be content with what we have. Contentment doesn't mean complacency. It means finding peace and joy in the present moment, trusting that God will provide everything we need. It is a lesson that often takes time to fully grasp. But when we learn to be content in all circumstances, we are able to enjoy life more fully and appreciate the blessings we already have. In the end, the purpose of financial testing is to refine us and prepare us for the greater things God has in store. It's not about punishing us or making us suffer for no reason. It's about shaping us into the people He has called us to be, so that when the breakthrough comes, we are ready to handle it with humility, wisdom, and gratitude. We are being prepared to step into a future where we can be faithful stewards of the blessings God has given us, and use those blessings to bless others and further His kingdom. It's a process that requires patience, faith, and trust, but the reward is more than worth it. The shift from suffering to prosperity is not a simple or immediate transition. It's not just about suddenly going from financial struggle to financial success. It's about a gradual process of growth, learning, and transformation that prepares God's chosen to handle prosperity in a way that glorifies Him. The suffering faced during financial hardship doesn't end with the arrival of prosperity. It transforms us into the kind of people who can steward wealth with integrity, humility, and a deep awareness of God's provision. When God's chosen begin to experience breakthrough in their finances, it's not just a financial blessing that they receive, it's a spiritual shift as well. They have learned through their hardships to rely on God for their every need. They have seen Him provide in unexpected ways, often when they thought there was no way out. Their faith has been tested, refined, and strengthened through the fire of financial struggle. Now, when the blessings of prosperity come, they know how to handle them with gratitude and wisdom, recognizing that their wealth is not an end in itself, but a tool to fulfill God's greater purpose for their lives. This transition from suffering to prosperity is also about stewardship. Those who have walked through financial hardship often have a deeper understanding of the value of money and resources. They know the importance of using what they have wisely, not for selfish gain, but for the greater good. Financial prosperity, when it comes after a season of struggle, is accompanied by a sense of responsibility. It's about giving back, helping others, and using wealth to further God's kingdom. It's about being faithful in small things, so that God can trust us with larger things. This is the essence of the shift from suffering to prosperity. Learning to manage blessings with a humble heart. The lessons learned in the midst of financial hardship, the lessons of patience, trust, and contentment, are what prepare God's chosen to embrace prosperity when it comes. They are no longer driven by materialism or selfish desires, but are focused on using what they have to honor God and bless others. The shift is not always immediate, and sometimes it may feel like the struggles never end. But the truth is that God's timing is perfect. When we are ready, when our hearts have been prepared, the breakthrough will come. The key is to continue trusting in God's plan, even when the road is long and the journey feels uncertain. And when prosperity does come, it will not overwhelm us, because we will have been made ready through the process of suffering. The shift from suffering to prosperity is not just about financial wealth, it's about spiritual maturity, faithfulness, and a heart aligned with God's purposes. If you found this video insightful, take a moment to reflect on your own struggles and how they might be part of God's greater plan for your life. Trust that He is using these moments to prepare you for something greater ahead. Be sure to check out our next video to dive even deeper into how God's purposes unfold through life's challenges.